Hello guys, today what I'm going to do is show you how to create wet t-shirts or indeed wet clothes of any type, wet cloth, whatever you want. So I'm going to use Michael, although some of the effects are much more evident when you work with Victoria or any female because of the breast impressions tend to make wet t-shirts look more obvious. So here, for example, let's so we've got wet t-shirt. If you see here, this is a far more obvious here, but I don't really want the video um, to be struck or have any issues because it's a bit crude. So we're going to work with this image here, but we're actually going to apply it to Michael. So what is special about wet t-shirts? Well, as soon as material gets wet, a number of things change about it. Basically, the color changes. Generally, the color gets darker. The transparency decreases very often. The specularity increases as the water reflects light more. The material weight changes. Although it gets heavier, it also gets more wrinkly and kind of sticks to the body more. And it develops more wrinkles. So we're going to try and simulate those with with this t-shirt. So what I'm going to be using today is Michael 4 and Sickle T. So I'm just going to drag that over and drop it onto Michael to make him. In fact, I shouldn't have done that. Right, okay, let me undo that. I'm just going to double click to add it to the scene and you'll see why. Right, so there's my t-shirt. And if I go T-body and then edit, and now I can duplicate that. And this is so important when you're working to have a reference so that you see what you've come from, if that makes any sense. You know, like if you were doing a pharmaceutical study, you'd call it a control unit, so you just know what changes. So this is a white t-shirt. I've just turned the brightness up so that it's a bit more obvious. So it looks grey in normal lighting, to be honest. And this one on Michael is the one that we're going to make wet. So let's go into the material room. And so in the material room, and I'm just going to click on the t-shirt. And this t-shirt's nice and easy because it doesn't have lots of parts. This kind of makes for a less versatile t-shirt or clothing item, to be honest, because it just has this single texture map. But for the sake of what we're doing, it's going to be fine. A lot of t-shirts have separate V's, separate hems and side panels and all that sort of stuff, and that's great. But just for today, we're going to work with this single material tee. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my, oh, I hope that's not trying to grab, no. Okay, I'm going to go into my materials and I'm just going to apply this plain white texture, see if that, okay. So what it's done now is it's actually applied a plain white, which kind of looks grey. I'll do the same on this other one as well. I call it plain white, but it's grey. I don't know what, I don't know what Sickle was thinking there, but anyway. So what we have here is an image map, a bump map, and that's pretty much it. Really, really simple stuff, but it works for this clothing item. So if I just give that a quick render, you can see where we're coming from. Obviously, you'll have the reference image here. So this is set on a very low number of samples on cycles. So let's go back into our material room. So the first thing we're going to do is start to change the color. So click on the t-shirt to pick it up in the material room. Here's the t-shirt here. We can tell by looking up here. It tells you the name of the object we've selected and the material component that we're going to adjust. So the first thing we're going to do is decrease the brightness, and the easiest way to do that is just to move down there towards darker grey. Okay, so I don't know if that's going to be enough yet, but you can see. So if we compare to our reference image here, see how that's much darker. We don't know what color it came from, but I'm assuming like a light tan or something, just judging by a hair color as well. So we've made that darker. Now we need to give it a bit of a shine. So with cotton has very little reflection or diffusion. It's a very non-reflective material. But when it gets wet, obviously the cotton takes on the properties to a certain extent of the water that's embedded in it. So what I'm just going to do now, I'm going to simulate that. So I'm going to go to my specular and I'm going to do my specular color as white. Now, you could change that for a different color that's in the room, you know, say red lighting or blue lighting or something. I tend to like to keep my specular neutral and pick up the colors from the lighting in the scene. If you give your specular a color here, then regardless of what you do with the lighting, it's going to pick up the color that you set here. And then I'm going to set the value, and I think here specular value of 0.1 will be plenty. And we'll just give that a little test render. So when we start doing wet t-shirts, it's a lot of suck it and see, just like there is with a lot of things in Poser. So we can see here some specularity showing. You know, the specularity are these little bright spots. Maybe I'll take that specular value up just a little bit. Maybe I'll double it. And the highlight size, that's kind of good on the default there. Let's just have a look there. The highlight size is relative to the size of the object. So something that's 0.1 on this might only be this big, but if this object were 10 times bigger, then the highlight size would be 10 times bigger. So now we're starting to get something that looks a little bit more shiny looking, which again, if we go back to our reference image, and it really is about going back and forwards to the references all of the time. So if we have a look at that, so that's quite shiny here. And compare that to our image here. We could make that more shiny. We'll see how that goes. But something else that I want to do now is to just add a little bit of transparency. I'm just clearing these out of the way so as I can see. So this is all what I would consider to be level 1 wet clothing. So here we'll just set that transparency to let's say 0.5. Oh, no, that's too much. It's almost disappeared. So let's say 0.3. Okay, let's give that a render and see how that looks. Okay, that's really over-exaggerated that in the preview, but okay. So why do we want transparency? Well, for anyone who has ever seen wet t-shirts, see here you can see the nipple showing through, and you can see the skin here. So that's really quite common when you do wet t-shirts. So, you know, it depends if that's a detail that you want, but at least a level of transparency so the skin changes the color of the t-shirt as well. Obviously, if this is white, then the transparency is going to matter even more. So I'm quite happy with that level of transparency, and I would say that's a good level 1 wet t-shirt. Maybe I might just take the specularity just up a little touch. And again, you'll be adjusting back and forwards here. So specular value, say 0.4. And render that. Possibly a bit too much. Now I need to take the specular size down a little bit. If we compare the size of the reflection on this, it's really quite small, only on the highlights. There's a kind of a patch here. So let's maybe take that specular size down a little bit. So let's say the specular highlight size here to 0.0503. And that'll do for now. It's enough to prove the principle anyway. Okay, so that's kind of looking okay. Now you see here, hopefully, that the bump map is quite affecting the specular. It's giving it this kind of graininess, and that might be what you want. But generally speaking, when a t-shirt gets wet or any cloth, but especially cotton, it tends to lose detail. Basically, the water, you could think of it as the water creating a film that smooths out the bump texture of the cotton. So you could even go in here and take this bump level down to half as much or whatever. Again, just suck it and see what looks good. And there you go. Okay, so that's level 1 done. That kind of looks wet, kind of looks transparent. You could keep on tweaking that ad infinitum. Now what we're going to do, if you look at this t-shirt, you'll see there's wrinkles in it. As it gets wet, the cotton gets heavier and it clings to the skin more, and you get more of a wrinkling. So this t-shirt model's got some wrinkles you can see here and here and here. I used to really like Sickled stuff. She was kind of ahead of her times in terms of material, but I've this nowadays, you know, is there's a lot better t-shirts than this, and also excuse me, and also cloth room stuff. So it kind of clings even better. If you were using a cloth room, what you'd want to do is increase the weight of the t-shirt, but also decrease its fold resistance so it wrinkles more. But we're going to manually put some wrinkles in because most of the clothes actually, most of the clothes are auto-conforming clothes, so they don't conform to the figures. Now, when I was testing this before, the t-shirt didn't go transparent like that, where you can't actually see the shirt. So what I'm going to have to do is take that transparency level and I'm going to take that down to 0 just so as I can see the shirt while I'm working. And then I'll put that back up to 0.3 afterwards. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to choose T body and then go up here to the morphing tool, and I'm going to create new, and I'm just going to call this wrinkles. Now what I want to do is I want to have this set to pull, and it's going to be relative to the surface of the object. So that means if I had it relative to the screen, it would, when I do pull, it just comes out towards the screen. So even when I go around the side, if you imagine in and out is Z, so the further away from this figure we get, that's Z minus Z, and the closer towards the camera we get, that's plus Z. If I have it relative to the screen, everything will move in Z. Whereas if I leave it or set it to relative to surface, it will basically work on an object coordinate system where it moves in tangent to the surface of the t-shirt. So when I pull here, you'll see, hopefully see, it's kind of pulling outwards, and when I pull here, it pulls towards the camera, so it's always basically at a right angle to the surface. Okay, so let me just undo those. So if I just have a quick glance at my reference, what have we got? We've got a little diagonal wrinkle here, we've got a little diagonal half joining there, we've got some smaller ones joining up there, so we're just going to simulate those. So what I need to do is I need to choose a brush size here, radius, which is appropriate to the size of the wrinkles we want, but I'm also going to choose here, this is the hardness of the brush. So if I choose this end, it'll have very sharp edges, which really doesn't look good on cloth when we're trying to make it blend into the rest of the material. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave it on this very soft fuzzy edged thing, and even that's actually going to be too hard, and I'm going to set the magnitude to whatever level I think is appropriate. It's if you set the magnitude too high, so what is that, 2600, so if I set that to maximum, what you get is these enormous great gouges on the cloth, which can take a lot of cleaning up. On the other hand, if I set the magnitude too low, let's say 0.1, what happens is you have to repeatedly go over and over and over to try and get the effect that you want. And what that can do is get these kind of uneven bits where you didn't perfectly follow the right line. So I think you're better off to get just enough. So what was that, 0.206, 0.206 there? Just enough. Oh, that's the size, idiot. And this magnitude is also going to be 0.2. And now what we'll do is, actually that needs to go down a little bit. We're just going to brush on those wrinkles. So we're going to do one down here, one kind of halfway up here, so they don't join, because obviously one continuous wrinkle from here to here wouldn't be realistic unless there was something underneath actually causing it. So what we're doing is simulating the way that the cloth catches onto the skin. So okay, why has that done that? Okay, what I have here is this is the preview mode, and I don't know why everything's just suddenly reset, but I don't know why there are 3 preview modes. When you have a lower speed processor, it may not be able to keep up with what you're doing on the screen. So you can set box mode like this, and it just lets you move the general shapes around, but it doesn't give you fine detail. The next one is fast, which again gives you box mode, but when you go to draw stuff, it goes back to fully shaded mode like this. And then the last one, which most of you are working, is full. I don't know why. I must have pressed a key or something. Right, so anyway, I'm going to grab here and I'm going to draw my diagonal line down to there. Now I'm going to draw another one up here. So it's cutting across the wrinkles that the creator's already done. And you see there I went back. Now I'm going to reduce the size of my brush for some finer detail. I'm just going to add a couple more wrinkles here. They don't have to follow the existing wrinkles. And maybe just one across the chest there. Okay, now you can see they're kind of a bit bumpy. Probably if I render that, it will be obvious. Let me have a look. I could have done Control R actually. I don't know why I didn't do that. Okay. So they're kind of a bit jaggy and a bit high. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose this smooth option here, and I'm going to have a bigger brush than the size of these, and I'm just going to run it back and forth over those just to kind of smooth those down a bit. Now I could use this restore, which would take it all the way back to kind of where it came from, but for this I just want the kind of the jaggy edges taken off a bit. And you can imagine that I could spend quite a bit of time here just getting these to look more natural. They don't look supernatural, but it's enough for you to get the idea. And I go here, so I think they're actually a little bit high. So here's my wrinkles morph. So you'll see here it's the t-shirt full body and then the wrinkles morph. And I'm just going to lower those down just a little bit by decreasing the value of those wrinkles there. And now if I render that, hopefully, this one's actually a little bit too long, but you see the idea anyway. It's far from perfect, but that's the idea. Okay, so maybe I could increase the transparency. Now that I've got a lot of light bouncing around, I can't see through it quite as well. So let's go to my transparency here. Oh, well, I've got no transparency. I must have undone it. Right, okay. 0.3 did I say it was? Oh yes, of course I took it off because it's doing this weird transparency thing. Right, there we go. So that's not looking bad actually, is it? I think you'll admit, but there's one more final detail that we could do. I'd call this level 3. So if we go back and look at one of the more kind of salacious t-shirts like this one, you'll see here that it actually goes transparent at the pressure points. So where her belly comes through, where her breasts are poking out, the transparency is more apparent. I'm not quite sure what the physics explanation is, but we don't care about that. We're just going to try and simulate that. So the way that we need to do that is to create a transparency map. And what a transparency map does, let me go into the material. What a transparency map does is where the map is black, it will be very transparent. Where it's white, it won't be transparent at all. And we're going to plug it into this transparency slot here. So, excuse me. So to do that, first of all, we need to know where the maps are stored. So I'm going to go into here to pick up the map for this t-shirt. And I'm just going to click there as if I was going to load it, and it takes me to the folder wherever the person has stored it. Then I'm going to copy that address here, and then I'm going to go into my image editor. Now, you could be using Photoshop, or you could be using a free program such as Affinity, or a bit cheaper ones such as Photo Paint. The process is going to be much the same. So I'm going to do open, and here I could just paste in the address that I'm going for. So what I'm going to do, if you look at these maps here, none of these are transparency maps because the creator didn't have a need for transparency maps. So what I want is a map that has a high contrast between whatever the object is and the background. So any of these here, this one would be fine. And so I'll just choose this white one here. No, I'll choose this black one. Okay, so here, there's actually some bumpy stuff going on there as well, weirdly, given the fact that that isn't going to actually apply to the model. But this basically gives us a shape of where the transparency map is going to be. So remember, black is going to be transparent and white is going to be solid. So what I actually want is somewhere in between, because I don't want it to be completely opaque and I don't want it to be completely transparent. So what I'm going to do here, first of all, I'm just going to use a magic wand tool to make a selection of this kind of inside area. I could do it without doing that, but it's just easier if I do it this way. And I'm going to make sure the tolerance is 32, or you could even go 64 depending on the contrast. The tolerance is how similar to the selected color something has to be selected. So if I had a very, very high tolerance, suppose I turned that up to 255, the maximum, anything within 255 shades of the selected color, in other words, everything would get selected. And you see there the black, the grey, everything has got selected. Control D to deselect. But if I go to 0, as you can imagine, very little gets selected. Only colors that are exactly the same color as the pixel you select. So the default for this is 32, and in this particular case that's going to work fine. You're going to need to find something similar in your own image application. So I click there and it's selected all of the white, couple of little bits in there, doesn't matter, we can easily get rid of those. But if you do want to change them manually, you can just go in here, select the manual selection brush, choose a brush, and just manually paint those out here. If I zoom in, you can see that. So everything that's red is going to be selected, everything that's white is going to be unselected, and everything that's not red is going to be selected. Right, I can't talk and think at the same time. Right, so there you go. So I've got rid of those little fireflies that were in there. Okay, now I'm just going to press Shift Control I to alternate my selection. So now the black t-shirt is selected. So I selected the background because it was easier to select than manually getting all of these bits. Now I've got the selection of that background. I just Control I to invert the selection, so now everything that isn't the background is selected, and you'll see that if I just pick up a red brush here, you can see everything that's not in the selection is protected. What I want to do here is I want to make, if black is going to be transparent, I want this all to be white. So the easiest way is just to get a really big brush. So I've B for brush, really big brush, X for default colors. Oh, no, sorry, I've forgotten what default. D for default colors, X to switch over, and now just brush all of that white. Okay, I do have 100% flow. Okay, I don't care about this down here for now, but I'll do it anyway. What the heck? Okay, so now I have a fully opaque map. So if I added this to my t-shirt, the t-shirt would have no transparency. But what in fact I want to do is I'm just going to simulate the breasts and pretend that we've got some abs as well. I'm going to do a really quick and dirty job, and instead of drawing directly on there, I'm going to create a new layer, and it will become apparent in a while. So just do some abs and then increase the brush size. We'll do pecs and pecs. And now when I save that, if I save it as Photoshop, that saves the layers, and that will become really important in a minute. So I'm going to save that as wet trans. Right. And I love the fact that you can load transparency maps into, you can load Photoshop images into Poser. That was one of the best things I ever did. Right, so I've created a new image. I'm going to drag that to transparency. Now, rather than having that at 0.3, I'm going to set that to 1. So that means maximum transparency in the areas that are set by the map. And now the map, I'm going to choose wet trans here. And now maximally transparent in the areas where the map is and not in the areas that aren't. And you'll see when I render. Okay, it's an awful job. You get the idea. I need to shrink that down. But also that's completely transparent. So now Right, I'm going to have to move these over, make these smaller. So that was a good proof of concept. So E for eraser, big brush, just going to erase those completely. B for brush, small brush. Okay, so trying to get the center point of this. Abs, that's probably too big. Abs. These are also too big, so let's match what size that. Oh no, that. There you go, just a bit smaller. Right, E for eraser, get rid of them. B for brush. That's probably going to be too small, but you know, we'll get there. We'll suck it and see. Right, Control S to save. Now, if Poser was not messing about at the moment and showing that transparency properly, it would be. What I'd do here is I'd reload my materials, even though they're actually going to work when I render. By doing reload textures, it just lets me see a visual representation as I work. I don't know why it's doing that now. Poser's got lots of little bugs, but anyway, so then when I do a render, you'll see it's going to be slightly different. There you go. I moved that over enough, as I thought they are too big. These are a bit too small, so we're kind of edging towards it. Need to move that boob over. This one needs to go out a little bit. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to change the size of the. Oh, for God's sakes, right. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move this out a bit and increase the size of it. So a little bit bigger, there you go. And I'm just going to move it over and I'm going to move it over. I might have to delete those. As I expected, these were way too big, but at least they're in the right place. So I just have to remember where they were roughly. B for brush. Small, 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 small. Right. Abs. When you want to draw with precision, it's a lot easier if you zoom in like that. It's the mistakes are less obvious, less. How can I put it? When the scale is bigger, you have finer control over fine detail. Right. Okay. Let's go and give that a render. See if that's any better. Okay, so that's getting there, but we've got a very, very high contrast between transparency and completely opaque, and we have no transparency on this. So this is where the two separate layers comes into it. So the first thing I'm going to do to make this less transparent, I need it to go towards grey, and the easiest way to do that is just to take this layer and then just change the opacity. So we'll make it to say 50% there. And that whole layer is now 50% visible. And now just by doing that, you'll see that that starts to look more natural, a little bit more natural. Okay, maybe even not 50%, maybe even more. And the great thing is, because I've done it with the opacity rather than trying to choose the right color, I can just keep tweaking this until it gets somewhere that I quite like. So we'll say 30%. Any time that you can have parametric values when you work, i.e. things that can be live edited, that's better for you. Okay, so that's kind of getting to the right place. It's too high, obviously. These abs need a ton of work, but that doesn't matter. Okay, now the t-shirt is too opaque here, so now I need that to go darker. So I'll go back to my Photoshop, and what I'm going to do this time, let's see, do we have a hue saturation? So I'm going to add a hue saturation. Again, it's parametric, so I'm going to add a hue saturation, whatever this is called, adjustment layer. And up here I can see hue and saturation, so it's only going to apply to the layers below it. So what I'll just do is I'll take the lightness, I want it to become less light because I want it to become a bit transparent. And there. And again, the beauty of Poser, being able to read files like this. Now when I click render, too much. Okay, so I need to go back a little bit. So I need that to be a bit lighter. So I'll go up here, just change that lightness back towards the 0 point, which is the midpoint. About there, shall we say? And there's the idea. So I know that's not a proper, it's not a perfect wet t-shirt, but you can see how it's kind of moving towards it. Maybe now that I've got the transparency, I need to take the opacity down again, the specularity down again. So let's go back to 0.2. I think that was a bit too shiny. So you could use this just as easily. Supposing somebody's drinking and they get you know, a bit of their drink on their clothing, or you're doing an adult scene and you want the effect of some body fluids on some clothing, you know, that Clinton moment. Um, this can be done for that as well. So I hope you'll see. It's not perfect. I could definitely improve it with time, but this is a good start towards getting kind of wet looking clothing. I probably should make that a bit darker overall. Let's give that a tweak. Take that grey down a little bit more. And even if you're working with coloured clothing, yeah, I think that's kind of looking wetter than it was before. Even if you're working with coloured clothing, start off by using shades of black in that diffuse colour slot rather than shades of the actual colour of the clothing. Especially if you've got something with patterns, you're not going to be able to do, you know, the pattern. I guess you could take this here and then take it through a HSV slider, excuse me, take it through a HSV slider and then change the value. I'll show you what I mean here. So if I add a new node here, and then I do a math node here, and I do HSV2, plug this into here, into the color, plug this into diffuse. I'm going to turn that to white. Okay, and what I'm going to do here is just show the preview so you can see what's happening, and I could just take the value down by 0.5, and that'll just make that darker. Same thing, yeah. But I like this because it just it seems to work nice. Let's see what HSV does to the rendered effect. Not quite, yeah, not quite as strong. So if you do HSV, you're going to have to increase this value more. So value 0.1. Let's see what that does. There you go. It's kind of headed in the right direction. I mean, I guess the HSV is a bit more parametric because it's easier to change that value than it is to change the color by eye. But either way, they get you to the same place. Anyway, guys, I hope that gives you some ideas, and I will speak to you later. Okay, guys, I was just about to put the video to bed, and I thought I'd try and find something female, try and make something female just to prove the point. And I was using this t-shirt by an artist called Hongyu, and then I realized, ironically, when I went in to look at the maps, that they already did a wet map. So this is a really nice example of a wet t-shirt map. But something that was interesting about this, I thought, was that the t-shirt is actually very matte, and the wet just gives you transparency. So if I look at the material room for this t-shirt, you'll see that, as I said before, they do a transparency map, which is plugged in here into the transparency, set to a value of 1. I've also got an ambient value for some reason, but this transparency map is also used as a specular map, same map. Oh, let me go there. Strictly speaking, they could have just pulled these connectors off this one. I don't know why they did two separate ones. It would have been clearer. But anyway, so what they're doing is controlling the amount of shine on these areas as well as the transparency, and it's just a slightly different approach to mine. They've done the transparency, but they haven't darkened the cloth. And if you look at this photograph here, you'll see that exact same thing. So she's very wet, but the cloth doesn't go shiny and reflective, even though it's very, very wet. And I think the reason is that perhaps synthetic cottons, you know, like mixes, polyester, that sort of thing, tend to go shiny, or maybe it's just the lighting, whereas plain cotton remains matte even when it's wet. So you're going to have to adjust your tactic according to the type of the type of cotton or the type of material that you actually want to do. Right, enough of you, put your tits away. Right, according to the effect that you want to produce. But I just thought this effect by the creator called Hongyu is a really nice example of a nice transparency, and the specular is not really showing very much, but the transparency map shows up really well. Hope that helps. You take care, guys.